Purdue fans. This is Johnny DeCamp bringing you play-by-play the rousing...
Everybody, along with Ron Kramer, this is Pete Van Wieren welcoming you to Ross-Ade Stadium.
Live from Ross-Ade Stadium in West Lafayette, Indiana.
It's a football Saturday in West Lafayette, Indiana, and one of the biggest home games in decades.
Boilermakers rush the field. What a night at West Lafayette.
Your Central Indiana Ford dealers are a proud sponsor of Purdue football and the Ross-Ade's Greatest Games podcast. Visit your local Central Indiana Ford dealer today.
Welcome back to the Ross-Ade's Greatest Games podcast. I'm Corey Palm. He's Tim Newton, and we are taking you through some of the greatest games in the history of Ross-Ade, which turned 100 years old last year. This year is actually the calendar celebration as it opened in November of 1924.
The days just roll by.
They just flew by. It's amazing how fast 10 decades can go. Today we're talking about a very special game for Purdue football and anybody who's of a more recent vintage of Purdue fan. A very special day. The first win of the Tiller era. It's 1997 versus Notre Dame, and it was an important game.
You have to put a little context, and I know a lot of our fans will remember, but for those who may be a little bit more recent vintage, you look at Purdue football, and it had really two golden eras back in the 1960s with Jack Mollenkoff, and then in the late 70s, 78, 79, 80, a three-year period where Purdue won 28 games. After that, the well ran a little bit dry. Okay. Other than a couple of years with Jim Everett in the mid-80s, it was a long, dry spell. And Joe Tiller took over the program after the 1996 season. There was a lot of excitement. He was going to bring a new style of football to Purdue and to Ross-Ade Stadium. And the Boilermakers go to Toledo to open the 1997 season and get rocked by a couple of touchdowns. And I'm sure a lot of people were thinking, well, here we go again. So then you've got Notre Dame, which is always a big game anyway. And, of course, they're ranked in the top 20 with Ron Paulus, who was on his way to 3 Heisman trophies in a row, right? That's
right.
What Bino Kip
That's what I remember.
And I don't think many people gave Purdue much of a chance that day.
Absolutely. The resounding thud in Toledo, and I know sort of whether it's true or a legend, and as the old line goes, when in doubt, print the legend. Coach Tiller met with his team after that loss at Toledo and said, guys, we're going to be fine. Yeah. And he believed in his system. He believed in his team. There was a lot of talent on that team, as we came to see throughout the course of the 97 season. And it sort of all came to fruition on that day. One quick note about the crowd, it bought in completely.
Yes.
It was a packed to the top rim of the stadium sellout, 68,000 plus in Ross-Ade that day, and a familiar face on the opposing sideline, which is a really fun sub-story here.
Yeah, Jim Coletta, who had been Purdue's head coach, was now the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame and made some comments during the week about he thought he would be a much better coach with better players, insinuating, and not probably wrongly, that the Irish had more talent on their roster than the Boilermakers had. But I think if that team needed any more incentive that day, Jim provided a little bit for them.
Absolutely. The game got off to a good start for the Boilermakers. Senior quarterback Billy Dickens, seeing his first real action at the helm, takes the team on a 11-play, 99-yard scoring drive to get on the board. About midway through the first, Edwin Watson covered a lot of ground on that drive, and he punched it in.
Yeah, I remember after that touchdown drive, we all kind of looked at each other in the booth. Okay, we didn't see that last week, but okay, let's see if this can hold. You mentioned you can't have a longer touchdown drive than that, and it was a very methodical drive. Billy Dickens, who, he's a story in and of itself. He came here as a quarterback, then was moved to a defensive back, became a quarterback in the basketball on grass system that Joe Tiller ran, and did it so well he was the Big Ten's most valuable player that year.
He was a revelation and really a sign of things to come. There was another quarterback on the roster that season. He saw a lot of time here and there. We're number 15. We've talked about him plenty over the years, but Dickens was the man that season.
No
like you
question.
said, Big Ten Player of the Year, and everyone automatically goes to Drew Brees, but Billy Dickens was special.
People forget, after the 1997 season, the biggest question in the offseason was, can Drew Brees be as good as Billy Dickens? And that sounds like an absurd question to ask. It was a real legitimate question. In fact, to the point where Joe Tiller recruited another quarterback in that offseason, David Edgerton, because they thought Breeze would be really good, but they weren't totally convinced. And so, as we know, the story turned out pretty well.
Funny thing, Drew Brees was still undersized. All the knocks that were on him early were, I mean, he's done okay. Edwin Watson scored, like I said. He scored again for the Boilermakers in the first half. Purdue led 14-10 at the half. Let's talk a little bit about Watson. I know running backs don't usually get as much attention in the Tiller system, but he was an important one.
You had a really good 1-2 punch on that team with Edwin Watson and Kendall Matthews. They had a little bit different running style, but Edwin Watson was a very effective running back. He was able to catch the ball coming out of the backfield, and really a good complement to what Purdue did in its passing game.
Third quarter, come out in the third quarter. Both teams, it's 14-10 in favor of the home team. The visitors are probably a little bit rattled, not sure that they were going to get this kind of a game. Scoreless third quarter, and we go early in the fourth quarter. Notre Dame with the ball and driving. You mentioned Ron Paulus and his multiple Heisman trophies and greatest quarterback of all time. He'd been kind of under pressure all day. 7 tackles for loss, just 1 sack by the Boilermakers, but they were making him work for it back there. There was a Notre Dame ball, like I said, near midfield, flush Paulus out of the backfield. He tucks it and runs it, and he runs into a 2-man wall in the bodies of Chucky Nokori and, of course, Roosevelt Colvin.
Yeah. And luckily the ball bounced out, and maybe the first sign that things were going to bounce Purdue's way in 1997. Took a big old Sunday hop right to Adrien Beasley, who was able to get it on the run and go down the sideline for a touchdown, and Ross-Ade Stadium just became unglued at that point.
Absolutely nuts. 43-yard fumble recovery for Beasley, who's a name a lot of Purdue fans are very familiar with for his exploits over the years. That stakes the home team to a 21-10 lead, like you said, just 68,000 people losing their minds. Notre Dame able to get some of that back, but they didn't score until there were about 2 minutes left in the game to make it 21-17. Now things get a little tighter. Again, now it's a 4-point game again. Now we're 1 bad hop away from oh no, how's this going to go? And there have been plenty of bad hops in this series. Notre Dame had won 11 straight in this series. It was 1985. It was Jim Everett. The last time Purdue beat the Irish, and 68,000 Purdue fans a little nervous at that point.
They were. And Notre Dame, I believe, tried an onside kick. Purdue recovered it. So one of the challenges when you run a spread offense is, can you run the dreaded 4-minute offense? Now, in this case, it was a 2-minute offense. But a gain on first down. I think they had a second down, and I don't remember what the distance was exactly. But everybody's thinking, well, Purdue's just going to run. And I think Joe Tiller showed a little bit of that magic that we came to expect, of expect the unexpected. Throws that little bubble screen to Vinny. Vinny takes it inside the 5, and from there Purdue ices the game. And I think that gave an indication this guy is here to win. He's not going to play safe. He's here to win. This is the only way that Purdue can win, is to really kind of play this all-out style and taking a chance, and that was the time. Second down is the time to do it, because in third down, if you're in that situation, everybody knows you're going to want to throw, and they're going to have different packages out there. So brilliant call, brilliant execution, and Vinny's got a little bit of speed.
He does. Vinny, true freshman, Vinnie Sutherland. This was his first real game where he contributed. He played against Toledo. He didn't do much, caught a couple balls, less than 20 yards total. But 8 catches, 100 yards, and none of them bigger than the 38 he gained on that bubble screen. When I was talking with Vinny, setting up the interview for this episode, he's like, "What game are we doing?" I said 97 Notre Dame, and his exact response was, "Oh, the birth of the bubble screen."
There you go.
I said, exactly. 38 yards down inside the 5, like you said. Kendall Matthews finishes things off. and the Boilermakers win going away 28-17. Dickens threw for 352 that day, the first of 5 300-plus yard games.
You mentioned the Ross-Ade Stadium crowd that day was up to the top of the stadium, and I remember specifically that game. We've seen field rushes before. I've never seen one that cascaded the way this one did. It was like an ocean spilling out onto the field. Here comes one row of students, and then the next row, and it was just a continual wave. And all of a sudden you look down and the field is filled, and people, I think, getting out all those years of frustration, because I think they understood, not only with the win, but the way the win happened, hey, we're onto something different here.
One of my favorite moments from that game happened after the game. It was during the field storming. Jackaroot, which growing up is one of the premier voices of college football, really one of the premier voices for ABC Sports altogether. Jackaroot was down on the sideline trying to get an interview with Coach Tiller. Yeah. And Jackaroot asked his question, and Coach couldn't hear him. So Jack asked his question again, and Coach still couldn't really hear him, but he just yelled a response anyway. They were being overrun with fans.
Miller just got the congratulations from the opposing coach, Bob Davey. It's pandemonium, Coach. Open year.
I hope we have a whole lot more of these. It's a great win for Purdue. First of many, we hope.
Does this validate your type of offense here? Does this validate your type of offense?
I can hear you. It's a great win.
Does this validate your type of offense?
It was such a cool, very real moment.
It was a lot of pent-up emotion coming out, not only from the fans, but I think from the players who had suffered through losing season after losing season. Anytime you can beat Notre Dame, it's a big deal, and especially in a case like this where you're a heavy underdog coming in. But I think, again, it was validation that what he was doing could work in the Big Ten, could work against national competition. And as we saw, Purdue going to a Rose Bowl a couple of years later, I think the hire was a good one.
It was.
I think we'd have to say.
That worked out. Got the win over Coletto. And it was the first of a 9-win season for the Boilers that ended with an Alamo Bowl win over Oklahoma State. A really nice capper to a really great season. Saw some fantastic wins. We're hoping to talk about at least one more of those later this season during Ross-Ade's Greatest Games, and might feature a guy we've talked about earlier in Roosevelt Colvin. Stay tuned for that. But for now, we are going to step aside, and when we come back, it'll be Vinnie Sutherland joining the show.
Your Central Indiana Ford dealers are a proud sponsor of Purdue football. Visit your local Central Indiana Ford dealer today.
We're joined now by Purdue legend Vinnie Sutherland. Vinnie, we talked a little bit in the open, and you've been saying that that 97 game against Notre Dame was the birth of the bubble screen. I don't know that anybody ran it better than you did in your time in West Lafayette. Thanks for joining us. When you look back at that game, what do you think of?
Well, I always think of the week prior, that Toledo game where it just seemed like such a track meet. And, we would have 2 good plays, then a bad play. And then you blinked and the damn score was out of hand. And, I was lucky enough to actually get a touchdown in that game. And I'll never forget the feeling. And then then we land back in West Lafayette. It was a quiet week. The coaches, they didn't come in there and yell and scream, man. I'll tell you, the seniors, that senior class, they were, man, they wanted that Notre Dame game bad. They wanted a piece of Coletto. I mean, the Billy Dickens, the Brian Niceleys, the Greg Smiths, the Leo Perez's, the Lee Brushes, all those guys, they wanted that game. And I remember there were audibles of freaking Coletto didn't change them. So our defense was slanting and rocking in safeties, and he never changed the verbiage of his audibles.
That kind of explains some stuff there.
Like I said, I'll go back to that week of practice, and I just remember, man, being a freshman, I was somewhat of a deer in headlights, and all those guys were much older than me, but they embraced me. They knew I could run. So, I tell you, as I look back, man, that senior class, man, they deserved that win.
Vinny, as you go back and look at that game, you mentioned the loss to Toledo the week before. So I'm sure everybody outside of the locker room is doubting whether this team is going to be any better than it had been the years before. When was it in that week, or was there ever a time that you had lost confidence, or that you knew that, hey, we're ready to go Saturday, we can beat these guys?
I mean, it was more just a pissed off senior class. Nothing got away from us. Even the flight home was quiet, and then it was such a back to work feeling that Tiller and the staff put on us. And that senior class had an edge. It really had an edge, and a great group of guys. They're all still close, and literally they were determined. If we weren't going to beat Notre Dame, we were going to definitely take a bite out of their ass.
It had been 11 years since Purdue had beaten Notre Dame, so I mean, they had some firsthand experience for sure.
All week we were told about that 11-game streak.
Well, during the game, so the game starts off and you get a 99-yard touchdown drive in the first quarter, which you don't get a whole lot of those. What clicked for you that day offensively?
Their strength, of that defense, I think for them was really their front seven. And they played three linebackers, so, we were four wide, sometimes five. You got to bring those bigger guys out, and they got to somewhat cover me, and it's difficult for them. They got like neck rolls and stuff, and they're out there trying to run with me. So, that was effective for us. And then when they started inching out, Ed Watson was better than most, that guy. And then Kendall Matthews, and then even Billy Dickens running the ball. It really opened up some lanes for those guys who at that time were, far better football players than I was.
What was the feeling on the sideline? You're up 14-10, but the game's back and forth, anybody's game, and you get the big fumble recovery by Adrien Beasley. Talk about the electricity on the sideline when that happened, because I don't know if I've ever heard Ross-Ade Stadium much louder than that.
I really felt like we were hit for hit with them. And, I look back, I remember vividly that Lee Brush would have everybody lined up to their audibles, and we were really one up on them. And then they had a couple of balls bounce their way. And then the game got a little tighter, and then that happened. And then, the rest is pretty much history. We had a lot of, it just seemed like we were we were making one play more than they were in just about every drive.
Well, let's go to that one play I think that people will remember from that game, and that is you guys get the ball back with a couple of minutes left, and the question is, can you run out the clock, and are you going to just try to run the ball? And they throw the bubble screen to you. Was that a sight adjustment, or was that the call from the huddle on?
Well, ideally, we wanted to hand it off, and that was a play called in from the sideline. I mean, I was a little surprised.
What's going through your mind now as a freshman and
get the first down, stay in bounds.
Notre Dame? Yeah.
The only thing in my mind was get the first down, stay in bounds, and I'll be damned, I damn near scored the touchdown. I should have gone for the touchdown, but it ended up working out because at the time, we used even more time, and it worked out great.
I went back and watched the broadcast just the other day, and yeah, that was a moment where if maybe you veer back to the middle instead of to the sideline, maybe you find the end zone. But they were also harping. Brent Musburger and Gary Danielson were harping on the fact that you stayed in bounds. I know that was a point of contention. It came up earlier in the game, and you made that snap decision. Maybe I don't need to fight for those last 2 yards. Maybe discretion, the better part of valor here. I just go down in bounds. Yeah.
Well, let's just say I wouldn't have wanted to go to that sideline had I gone out of bounds. That senior class was awfully good to me. That's because I didn't grow up much.
Vinny, that play I think showed, as did many other plays during your career, your speed. Were you always fast as a kid, or did it just come on? Maybe because of your size, you had to be.
Yeah, I was, and I ran track in high school, and, obviously I was, all Big Ten in track too. Running was easy for me. I could always do it. I don't jog real well, but I could sprint.
What was the locker
Maybe-
room? Go ahead, Corey.
I was going to say maybe he caused so many shenanigans as a kid that he had to run fast.
Yeah. When you're little with a big mouth, you learn to run.
We call that fear speed.
Yeah.
Yes,
you
it
mentioned
sure is.
you mentioned the locker room after the Toledo game. What was the locker room like after the Notre Dame game?
You know, it's funny. That senior class, and then there were former players that came in the locker room, and that one game the most. I'll never forget the school song in the locker room, and I, I'm looking around and I see all the looks in the seniors' eyes. I mean, Brian Alford, you name it. Everyone was in tears. They wanted that one so bad, and I was beyond happy to at least help and have my part in it, man. It's a game I'll never forget. And then I remember there was the press conferences and stuff like that. And I'll never forget my walk back to Wiley Hall when it was all over a couple hours later. I'm just a kid from Florida. And I made that walk all the way to Wiley Hall, and there wasn't a soul in sight. Everybody was already at Chauncey Hill.
You mentioned the seniors a couple of times, but you were part of a freshman class that was not very highly regarded. I mean, you guys, when they looked at the recruiting rankings, you guys were ranked dead last. The class that had you and Reed and all those guys. Was that a motivation for you throughout your career?
I mean, it's always a motivation when people freaking dog you and put you in last place. But, I think that, Purdue is such a blue-collar team. They're really, after All-Stott and guys like maybe Brian Alford, it wasn't like we were full of, draft picks, I guess would be the word. But everybody with Tiller had to earn it. You didn't come in and get anything. You earned it. So I think there was a mutual respect in that locker room that nobody came in bigger than what was there. And I think Tiller did a very good job of that. Like, if you came in arrogant, he would beat you down. And I was probably number one on the list.
Remembering fondly, of course.
Yes. He called me the dumbass from Florida.
Vinny, I don't think there's any question. Everybody that follows Purdue football know that you had a pretty good time and enjoyed your college time. What do you remember, though, most, whether it was football or otherwise, your time in West Lafayette? What do you take away from that the most?
And I'm from Southeast Florida, and what I'll always remember is the Purdue people and the people of Indiana they're just the best. I'm from Southeast Florida where the pace is pretty fast, and for the most part, people are friggin' rude. And I'll never forget just my first couple of weeks of school up there. You'd bump into someone, they'd apologize, and then they'd want to talk to you, and I'm just like, wow, this is different. I wasn't very well traveled as a high school kid, and I'll never forget it. And I tell people down here, I was like, you got to see it and believe it. Just people are great there, wholesome and everything. It's just great.
What brought you up here? Why'd you come up from Southeast Florida?
Well, I was recruited to a lot of big schools and got like the offers to play defense, believe it or not. I mean, I had a highlight film, it had a lot of defensive highlights, interceptions, run back and stuff like that. And, everyone, of course, that I hit wasn't looking. So it was quite a highlight film.
Yeah.
And then I envisioned myself, tackling Ron Dane and Curtis Enos, and I was like, pass on that. And Purdue, I think, was probably my biggest offer at playing receiver. And I always, thought I was a better player with the ball in my hand. And I was given the chance. And I remember on my visit to Purdue, I remember walking into the weight room, and they had, like the top tier guys at every position, their 40 time, their bench press and stuff like that. And I kind of fit, it's, for lack of a better word, was better than most of those. So I thought I'd be a fit,
Yep.
and I was. It was. I'll never forget that trip. I'm pretty sure I pissed off all of the players on that trip. That's what I did. But it worked out. It worked out. Believe it or not, Matt Light was my host. and he even ditched me.
Well, Matt likes to have a good time too, so.
Yes, he does.
Oh, Matt's great.
Oh, you had a great career at Purdue. Then you go on and play in the NFL. Biggest transition, obviously the best of the best go on to play in the NFL. But what were your biggest memories from playing in the league for a few years?
Tough league. And you don't get any redos. It's a tough league. It's a tough league. I think for people that think that the game owes them anything, you quickly find out it doesn't. That's a tough league. You really have to fall in line, and obviously things really need to go your way for you to make your mark as a league minimum guy. It's I don't know what to say. It's a tough league, and it helps if you stay out of trouble.
Yeah.
I don't think people are surprised, given your outgoing nature, that you went into sales after your playing days were done. Talk us a little bit about through what you're doing now and what you've done since you hung up the cleats.
Yeah, I didn't think I'd be much at punching a clock. I actually played a year in Canada in 2005. It really wasn't for me either. And then I had an opportunity down here to jump into insurance sales. And I did it, jumped in, got the license, and still doing it. It gives me the freedom to coach high school football. And got married 4 years ago. I got a 20-year-old son. So things are better now than they've ever been.
And I know I actually ran into you or walked past you in the concourse at the Final Four. So I saw you holding court with some of your buddies there. So the fact that you've stayed as connected to Purdue as you have, I think indicates the great experience that you had here.
It's the people. I when I'm not there, I miss it. When I'm not there, I miss it. My goal was to make enough money to where I could just go to every game. And if I didn't coach high school football, I'd be up there every game.
That's all. Do you love coaching?
I do. The game was good to me, and it's fun. If it wasn't fun, I wouldn't do it.
Now, what do you do, Vinny? What do you do when you have a Vinnie Sutherland on the field? Not just in terms of talent, but let's say in terms of temperament, or in terms of, okay, I got to put a little bit of a governor on this guy. How do you handle guys like that? How do you handle guys like you? I call it.
You got to give him the Joe Tiller. He who has all the gold makes all the rules.
I'll tell you what, we had Taylor Stubblefield on last season for games, and he talked as well about how different it is as a coach to approach this versus when you're the player being yelled at. How much different it is on the other side of that equation. So good to see you're reaching back to old Cowboy Joe on that.
Do you use any of his phrases?
Yeah. Oh yeah. He who makes all the goal, who has all the gold makes all the rules. That was the one he nailed into my forehead.
And he made the rules.
Plans to come back to campus anytime soon?
Yeah, I'll be up there for probably Notre Dame, Nebraska, and Oregon.
Okay.
And if I can talk the wife into it, hopefully Penn State.
There you go.
So that's the boss. So we gotta make sure everything's good.
We all work for the same corporation. We have bosses in the same regard. I guess
it's weird, isn't it?
Yes. Well, Vinny, this has been great. We really appreciate your time, this little trip down memory lane, and thank you for all of the great memories. 4 years of excellence on the field, and 40 years worth of stories to go with it.
Oh man, I wouldn't trade it for the world, man. The best times of my life.
Vinny, every time somebody says your name, they smile. And I think that's probably the greatest legacy you can have, is what your name brings joy to people.
Lord knows I always took fun too far. Definitely my best day, so I miss it. Thank you, fellas. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Vinny.
Look forward to seeing you back on campus.